Well, thank you for being here. One of the questions we ask of everybody is, how long have you been in active practice in Nevada?
22 years. I was admitted in '94 and been here ever since. It's the only state I'm licensed in.
Okay. All right. The questions that we have are about, and this was because I didn't know, and I should know, but I don't know, how some states have a Dental Practice Act that just has a statute. There's no administrative code with that. So how does an administrative code come about? And why do we need it?
The regulatory process? Well, I think, pardon me while I should. The legislature enacts the NRS statutes, and then typically, like in my experience, the agency that I'd be representing would enact their own regulations to more define, if you count the statute, say, as an outline of the restrictions or the regulatory action.
Right.
The regulations are more the procedures as to how to go about doing it. So if you say, for instance, the board is to hire a staff attorney. Right. You could have a regulation that says the process for doing that would be A, B, C, D, E. And so they're both subject to open meeting law, and the public has a chance to comment.
So then the states that don't have that, they're just falling back on their statute.
Yes.
Yeah. So it doesn't give boards as much guidance, then, I'm assuring that.
Correct. I think
they're making it up as they go along.
A lot more gray area.
Yeah. Okay. Because that seems like old school.
One seems like the menu, and the other one's the cookbook.
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly.
That's great.
Yeah. Exactly. Go ahead if you have questions.
Okay. And just to preface this, that we have a series of questions, not difficult, but we're asking each candidate the exact same questions. In Nevada, we're governed by the statute and the codes. And for dentistry, do you know what statute number that is?
It's 631, I believe, is
all right. And if a disciplinary screening officer is going through a case and he's reviewing materials that have been provided to him, and he comes across a situation where he has a question regarding the treatment of a root canal therapy on a patient, who is the most likely specialist he would call to get an advisory opinion to help him through that process? Do you know?
I don't know if it's the exact term, but like somebody like an oral surgeon, or I think any general dental practitioner would be able to answer the typical question. It's a specialist question.
Okay, and part of the process of being board counsel would be involved in legal counsel to board staff. And what do you believe that would entail?
I would believe it would probably be only in connection with work they do for the board. So say somebody files an action claiming that something one of the staff members did harm them in some way. One of the things would be to look whether it was something that would be covered by immunity, whether it was an intentional tort, say, as opposed to negligence in the practice of their duties. And it wouldn't be representing them if they got a traffic ticket or something, or bailing them out of jail or anything like that.
Okay. All right. Well, we can call Sophia for that.
So our board, we're just the governor selects us, and we're supposed to protect the public. We're supposed to kind of license dentists and make sure that the standard of care is upheld in the state. And so, do you know anything about the Las Vegas Dental Association?
I really don't. My experience over the past 15 years has been predominantly at the AG's office doing, I was so embroiled in mortgage fraud that that was pretty much all encompassing for about 8 years, as everyone knows.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was a tough time.
And then after I left the AG's office, I went to work for a private company as their general counsel, and they did a lot of Department of Defense contracts. They were called a heavy security contract, kind of like, they hate when I say this, but I call them Blackwater Light. They were hired to do things like that, and they're paid through the Department of Defense on individual contracts. So I haven't had any personal experience with the dental profession per se, but I have had a lot of regulatory experience, and I think that there's crossover in all of that.
Okay, go ahead.
This is kind of like a hypothetical, there's no right or wrong, but it's a scenario where a patient makes a complaint to the board, we do our investigation, and it goes the full extent to the hearing, and the evidence is like almost equal. And so, in your heart, who do you side with the professional, the licensee, or the public, the patient, the one that started the complaint? Do you have a favorite there?
I don't think you can have a general rule as to which one in every case. I think you have to take it on a case-by-case basis. And there's so many intangibles. You have to weigh credibility of the person that's filing the complaint, the credibility to a certain extent, the professional integrity of the dentist that's being investigated. If it's right on the line, I would have to, side with the professional. They are a licensed professional, and
Right.
a lot of times the consumer or the public or the patient may not understand. They may have a perception of what happened, but it may not legally be what they're claiming it is. They could the dentist in question could be well within the law, and the patient may assume it's a violation when it really isn't. So you have to take it on a case-by-case basis. But I would think if it's straight on the line, and you have to fall one way or the other, I would go with the dental professional, because
Yeah.
they're the one with the experience.
Okay.
That was a good answer. I'm glad you made the choice, because, it was just like, how do you feel in your heart?
Yeah.
What's going on? And I know evidence is important.
I've seen so many
Yeah.
instances, because I've done a lot of consumer representation
Yeah.
and with the Bureau of Consumer Protection, and a lot of times people feel aggrieved by government or professional representative taking care of them in any way capacity. But when you really look at the facts, there's no violation of the laws, no violation of the code. They just got their feelings hurt, or they just didn't understand what was happening, and you have to weigh that.
Most of the time, it's probably communication.
Yeah, and part of the process is letting them vent. I think sometimes when they're given the forum to at least get it off their
Yeah,
chest,
makes
that
them
makes
feel
them
better.
feel better.
Yeah. I don't have any more questions. Do you have questions about us, about how this board works? Not that I can answer them, but our executive director can.
Don't look at us.
I would assume that the full board would be the ultimate decision maker in
Correct.
an investigation.
Definitely.
Correct.
So the investigative process, my understanding is that if a complaint is filed, the investigation is generally done. If say it's a professional negligence question, a member of the board would do the actual investigating.
No.
No?
We have what's called disciplinary screening officers. So the board approves and vets the disciplinary screening officers. So we have dentists, general dentists, specialist, and dental hygienist to handle the dental hygiene cases. So if the case is related to a general dentist, the DSO would be a general dentist. If the case is with an oral surgeon, then we would use an oral surgeon, and all of them are approved by the board
That was my,
to
because I was
investigate.
wondering if there, I was concerned because it was a board member, then it would be a conflict.
No.
Right, yeah, we don't know
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah,
Okay, that
yeah,
makes
sense.
and it's all done anonymously.
Okay.
We have Dr. X,
Yeah.
and then,
And what's the, volume of complaints on a general, is it?
So, on average, we get close to 300 complaints a year,
Okay.
but they go through a review process, because we don't have jurisdiction over like a fee dispute or something to that nature, and obviously the public sometimes isn't aware of that. So, it's gone through a review process, and then if it's not something that we have jurisdiction over, we let the complainant know that, and then if it is something, or they believe that there could be a violation, then it's investigated, and then so the patient verifies the complaint. We have what's called a verification form, because our statute says upon a verified complaint or motion by the board. So there's two ways the board can investigate. One is through a patient complaint that's verified, and the other is the board, if they receive credible information that can be corroborated, they can authorize an investigation, and then I would request that on behalf.
Okay.
At a board meeting, but it's Dr. Y or RDHZ. Their names aren't on there because obviously you don't want the board to know who
Sure.
you're investigating until the case is brought forward to them.
Okay.
And most of the cases are not brought before the board.
Right, so, well, if they're remanded, so upon the investigation concluding, if there's not a preponderance of the evidence that there's a violation, then the complaint would be remanded to the file, and those remain confidential. And then, because the board didn't impose any action. So then, obviously, they can enter into consent agreements or stipulation agreements. And then, if that doesn't happen, then they can exercise their due process and go to a full board hearing.
Okay.
And then it's at that point, a formal complaint is filed to the board, and then they're aware of the allegations.
When you do a consent agreement, are there parameters that the board generally uses, or is it more the attorney's job to kind of construct it based on the facts of the case?
Well, how we do it now is the disciplinary screening officers will investigate, and then they will make their preliminary findings to say, okay, the root canal that was done, they perforated it through the side of the tooth, and they didn't advise the patient, and they didn't refer the patient to a specialist, and so that may be, unprofessional conduct.
Okay.
So then what would happen is, then he would suggest, like, he might say, you know what, but this can happen, so, I just think that the dentist needs to be remediated in this particular area, and then they'll actually, the DSOs, because they've been doing it so long, will say, I think maybe continuing education, and they'll kind of write out or guide, right, and then you would draft up
Okay.
the agreement,
They're like
based
our
on that.
expert witnesses,
Oh,
that
yeah.
that if you were in doing a trial.
Sure.
That would be the expert that you would bring in to represent your client.
Okay,
And
yeah.
they're the DSOs that work for us, they're all licensed dentists and.
Hygienists.
And hygienists,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that was my question, because I know
Yeah.
if I were drafting it, I would probably need to consult.
Yeah, you could just look at
Yeah, and then,
professional to say, well,
right, yeah,
yeah.
and they'll kind of give you like a narrative of, this is the alleged violation, and then this is,
the statute.
yeah,
Those are-
and they're pretty good, and they understand that, attorneys aren't dentists, so.
That makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, and then it's kind of like when we read them, we get to see them at the board. They're kind of like a template. It goes in order, and you see the findings, and then you see the continuing education requirement, and then you see the whole thing. So it's like if you see one, you can kind of fit it into the template.
It sounds similar to what I'm doing now, we do with the licensees and the insurance.
Because they're all kind of
Right.
similar,
We either
but
do
just a little
consent
tweak.
defined or some type of consent order with
Yes.
different.
Right,
Yeah,
so we
it's the same kind of
we have two, primarily two. We have what's called a corrective action, non-disciplinary stip.
Okay.
Because you're probably familiar with the National Practitioners Data Bank. So there's 6 areas that are considered adverse action. So when those 6 are in a stipulation agreement, or any one of those 6, probation, suspension, revocation, restriction of practice, public reprimand, and I forget the other one, but there's 6 components. Oh, fine. If any of those are contained in the stipulation agreement, they are under federal reportable to the National Practitioners Data Bank. And that could have a devastating effect on a licensee when trying to be a provider for insurance. So when there's an area that the dentist may be deficient in and needs some remediation, but you don't want to take it to the level where you're going to, take an extreme,
Sure.
on their license or on their livelihood, we do a corrective action non-disciplinary stip, and those are not reportable.
Okay, it's similar to how the Bar Association sanctions attorneys.
Oh, okay, yeah.
No,
Yeah.
we don't know.
And we get repeat offenders, obviously, but the first time, it's just like, we try to just remediate this as easily as possible and not interfere with their practice, but also protect the public.
Sure.
But then if we see repeat customers,
Yeah.
and then it's a little more, reportable, a little heavier fines,
Sure.
just because remediation didn't work very well, obviously, and so now we need to step it up a little bit. Then it becomes more disciplinary.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so we have on average between probably 100 to 110 investigations in a given year. It has been increasing over the last few years. And then, what else was I going to say? Of those, about 65% are remanded, which means there was no violation, or there wasn't a preponderance of the evidence that there was a violation. So about 65% of the cases we investigate, the board does not take any action on. And then you have the ones where they might enter into a corrective action stip. And then corrective action stipulations, any order by the board are public record, and they are available on our website. We have copies here as well for somebody to come in and inspect them.
And are the complaint forms for the public per se, not an instance where the board would recommend, but if it's a public complaint, is that access through the
Yes.
website as well? Okay.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah, they can do that.
Yes.
Yeah. And very, very rarely will it go through the whole process and come to a full board hearing. Usually there's a license in the wake here, because if it gets to that point, there's probably a preponderance of evidence that there was some violation, the public was damaged somehow, and it goes to a full board hearing.
Okay.
And then the Attorney General's office is here, a prosecutor's here, it's court reporter, it's just like a mini trial.
Sure, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
so that's the process.
Oh, that's
Pretty
very
s-
similar to what I'm doing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, just different stuff.
And what about as far as division of work between the north and the south?
We handle all of it. This is the only
This is
office
the
we
office.
have.
Okay.
So, if there's, like, right now, if we have a case up in northern Nevada, we conduct an informal hearing in that jurisdiction.
Okay.
So the attorney and myself and the DSO, we would
Go up.
travel up there. We try to keep it that the DSOs that are assigned to a case are in the same region. And the reason being is, in most cases, the patient has to be evaluated. So if I bring a dentist, then that's gonna be more costly
Sure,
for the
yeah.
board to have to
Bring
fly.
somebody from
Or
Reno
the
down to
patient,
Vegas.
and we don't wanna inconvenience the patients either. So usually, historically, the DSOs, unless there's overload, if you're in the Reno area or northern Nevada, the complaint would be assigned to you if the licensee the complaint's been filed against is up in that area.
Okay.
And I'm from Reno. The vast majority of complaints are down here.
I would imagine, yeah.
Yeah, because we have
There's a
the
big
more
population
majority
difference. Yeah.
of the licensees
So
are here.
so
But
we
it is
aren't as
probably,
busy.
it is probably population, the ratio is
Oh, sure.
is probably equated. I mean, if we have 3/4 of the population, we
You got
have 3/4 of the.
Right, you have
Yeah.
about, right,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's
that
based
makes
on that,
sense.
yeah.
But-
So it makes sense to have
But
the
the
attorney
majority,
here.
quite a few of the complaints are by repeat offenders.
No, I don't know about that. I don't,
Well, in the complaint process, there are repeat offenders.
yeah,
Yes.
but
Yes.
that's in any
The answer is
profession.
yes.
Yes.
The answer is
Yeah.
yes. Yeah.
Are there any areas of the current procedures that the board would be interested in revising? That'd be something that you want council to look at, or is everybody okay with it?
Well, I think, and I don't want to speak, but my understanding is, I think that the legislature wants boards, see, because each board, pretty much the process is the same, but they vary so much. So, the way the osteopathic board's complaint process might be different from the medical and the dental.
Sure.
And I think that the legislature would like to see it a little more uniformed.
Okay. Yeah, the reason I ask is when I went to work at the insurance division, one of the first assignments I was asked to do was, we regulate the bail industry and we basically want to rewrite the entire statutory code for the bail industry. I was like, okay, first let me learn the current one, and so I'm just curious.
Right, so for a statute change, though, that would require the legislature, so,
Yeah.
but for the regs and things, yeah, but.
Okay. That's all the questions I have.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks.
We appreciate you coming in.
Pleasure.
And the board will make a decision on the
Nice to meet you.
24th
Nice to meet you.
meeting.
Yes.